welcome. You're listening to the Just Love Them podcast. I'm your host, Shiree Best. On this podcast, we help find peace, hope, and healing with our loved ones who have left their faith. I got a message from a friend and a listener, Jeannie, who listened to last week's podcast and sent me a message that said, "Such a good podcast today. Thanks, Shiree. Can't wait to share it." I hope that all you listeners are sharing this podcast because the goal is to reach the people that need this kind of support. And I hope all of you are sharing it. This week, we're talking about part 2 of getting ready to have a healing conversation. Healing conversations are conversations we want to be ready to have, whether they come up spontaneously or a conversation that we start with the purpose of increasing the bonds in our relationship. The goal is to just love people wherever they're at and whatever they're doing. But sometimes it's hard to love people who are hurting your heart, who are making you mad and causing you grief and frustration. That's why we're getting ready to have healing conversations so that you're prepared personally. 2 weeks ago, I taught you my number one most used technique, write and burn. Did you try it? Did you try it more than once? Write and burn is what I use on a regular basis to get rid of strong emotions that pop up. If you did not hear that podcast episode, go back and listen to Getting Ready for a Healing Conversation Part 1. When the same trigger or the same reaction or negative emotion or the same situation pops up time and time again, that's when I know it's time to go deeper. That's when write and burn is not going to cover it. That's when I need a different technique. Do you ever have the same trigger that you get time and time again? And every time a similar situation happens or a certain person says something that gets your goat or the same scenario makes you mad to the point where it's predictable, would you like to get rid of that? Does it ever feel like you're giving your power away in those situations? Perhaps the other person, they just know how to push your buttons, or they know how to make you mad, or whatever the emotion is. And when you react in a similar way every time, or it takes all your willpower so that you keep under control and you don't react, when that same pattern keeps happening, that triggers a strong emotion, it means that there's something deeper there. It's under the surface. The issue is not really the issue. Let me say that again. The issue on the surface is not the real issue. And if you can figure out what the real issue is, you can get rid of it. And you can take back control of your emotions. Does that sound good? The process I'm going to teach you today, I have been using for over 10 years. And it has helped me heal from a multitude of relationship pains and hurts. Like a plant with deep roots, what you see on the surface is not all there is. So if you can dig down to that root and get it out into the light, the root of that hurt or the anger or whatever it is, it loses its power and you're able to resolve what's causing that negative emotion. This process allows you to be in a space to have a healing conversation without those negative emotions coming in, those triggers popping up. It allows you to be in a grounded space where you can have healing conversations. So the technique I'm going to teach you today, I call because papers. And it's one I learned from a mentor of mine many years ago. And I have used it so many times over the years, like I said. I genuinely do not know what I would do without this technique. I would not be in the emotionally healthy place that I am at this time without this technique. Well, I could probably say that about all the techniques I use, but this one is a particularly powerful one for me, and I hope it will be for you too. So here's how it works. This is more journaling. So last time I did the training in part 1, there was some journaling involved. This is going to involve more journaling. You'll need a piece of paper and something to write with. Again, handwriting is super powerful. So you get that piece of paper and you're going to use one of 5 emotions. Or if none of these fit, and you can think of another one, but these 5 emotions cover just about everything. And I know I talked about them on the podcast 2 weeks ago, part 1, but I want to review them with you so that you really, really get them into you. It is the acronym FADES, FADES. F stands for frustration, A, anger, D, disappointment, E, embarrassment, and S, sadness. I'm going to say those one more time. You might want to write those down. FADES, F, frustration, A, anger, D, disappointment, E, embarrassment, and S, sadness. I learned this acronym from my mentor, and they are so good. And sometimes I use just one of them when I'm writing, and sometimes I use a combination. And every once in a really great while, I use all of them. Those are the emotions you're going to focus on. You're going to start out the same way that you did when you did the write and burn. You're going to start out with, I feel, pick your emotion or your set of emotions. I feel, and whatever the emotion is, because. Now, the way that this is different is you're going to write everything that you can about that. But instead, when you get to the end, you're not going to read it out loud and burn it. Instead, you're going to put that paper away without even rereading it. So you're going to write, I feel, whatever the emotion is, because, write it all down. Don't read it. Put it away somewhere where no one else is going to read this. This piece of paper is like poison. You don't want anybody having it. You're going to put it away somewhere. Don't read it. The next day, you're going to get out a new piece of paper. And the second day, you're going to write, I feel, whatever it is, because, and it might not just be emotion. It might be you have a new statement or a new idea. It's going to be, I feel this way because. You're going to write everything that comes about that. I'm going to give you a couple examples that will help this set in. So again, you're going to do like the first day. You're going to write it all down. You're not going to reread it. Again, put it away. That piece of paper is poison. Don't let anybody see it. Put it away overnight. The next day, get it out and read it. And as you read it, you're going to have a new thought. That new thought becomes the topic of your third paper. And so you write, I feel, whatever that is, because. Now, by the time you read the third paper on the next day, you likely will be down to the root of what your issue is. If you're not, if you feel like there's more, you want to keep going, you can go for a fourth day and a fifth day. I've almost never had to go more than 3 days, occasionally, but very, very rarely. Okay, I want to give you a couple of examples. This first example I'm going to give you is actually on my YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel. I did a little, like a 3-minute one on because papers. And so if you want to look that up for fun, you could type in my name, Shiree Best, along with the words because papers, and you can watch that little YouTube video that I did a few years ago. But this is the example that I share on that little YouTube video. A little backstory, and I'm sharing this with permission. Our family every Sunday had kind of a tradition when the kids were at home of having a big Sunday dinner every Sunday. When dinner was over, whatever was left, we would put in the fridge. And my husband absolutely loved to use those leftovers to kind of meal prep his lunches for the week, which was great for him. But my teenage kids and me, we were just kind of out. Like he got the leftovers and I was resentful about it. I was resentful enough, and we'd had conversations enough that had created arguments that it was affecting the relationship a little bit. It was putting a little wedge in there. I didn't want a wedge in my marriage. So I decided to write because papers about it. And my very first because paper was called, I feel angry when my husband takes all the Sunday leftovers for his lunches because, and I wrote it all down, all my thoughts and feelings about that. And I put it away. Well, the next day I got it back out and I read it. And as I read it, I had a new realization. And so my second because paper title became, I'm selfish with food because. And I wrote everything about me being selfish with food. Well, I put that away. The next day I got it out and I read it. And my new topic became, so it's my new aha, I have food issues because. And when I got done writing that, I realized that we had been through some pretty tight financial times with all our 7 kids at home. And I had developed a scarcity mentality. And I was still in that scarcity mentality, even though we were no longer having those tight financial times, even though there was plenty of food now, even though there was no reason to have that scarcity mentality, I was still living in that past scarcity mentality. Well, that was the root. And once I was able to recognize that and pull it out into the light and look at it, I was able to let that go. Once I had the realization of what the root was, I thought, oh, this isn't serving me. I don't need this anymore. And I developed a desire immediately to want to give my husband the best. I wanted him to have the best of everything because I love him. He does so much for our family. And my mentality totally shifted, all because of those because papers. So that's how you walk it through. I want to give you another example. This was a relationship with someone who was in my same circles that I would spend time with people in. I was constantly feeling offended by this person. I felt like they didn't like me. I felt like everything I said was twisted. I just felt like it was very hard for me to be around this person. And I was constantly triggered, constantly getting my feelings hurt, constantly feeling offended. I was miserable and I needed to do something different. So I decided to write because papers and see if I could resolve this issue because I wasn't going to stop being in those circles of people. And so I needed to resolve how to do that and not be miserable. So my very first because paper was titled, I feel angry with this person because. And I wrote everything down, all the things that were bugging me. You don't have to be like tactful and sugarcoat anything because nobody's going to read this but you. And you want to get it all out. So all the feelings that you can think of, write until there's nothing left to write. So I wrote that all down. I put it away. The next day I got it out. I read it. As I read it, a new realization came to me. And the realization was this person hurts people because of some reasons that I knew of. So my title became, This Person Hurts People Because, and I wrote it all down. I wrote everything I could think of on that topic and I put it away. The next day I got it out, I read it, and my new title became, This Person Has Had a Very Hard Life Because. And by the time I finished writing why this person had a really hard life, I felt so much compassion. I felt so much understanding. It was like I was able to put myself in their shoes and see where they were coming from based on their experience. And because I had pulled that root out into the light and I'd looked at it, I was totally able to let it go. I was able to have a paradigm shift, just like I did with my husband and the food. I had this paradigm shift into compassion. I had another paradigm shift and I was able to let it go. And then the next time I was in a situation with this person, instead of coming to the situation from a place of preparing to be offended, looking for negative evidence that they weren't a good person, looking for all the bad, instead of coming from that place, I was able to come to the situation from a place of compassion, from a place of greater understanding, from a place of love. And it shifted the relationship. We never talked about it. The person was not someone that I was going to go to and have a conversation about my feelings. It didn't feel safe in that way. I don't know how the other person shifted or if they shifted, but I shifted and I felt different toward them. And I felt different in that environment with that group of people. I felt peaceful. I know that the other person at least no longer felt negative energy coming from me because there wasn't any negative energy coming from me anymore. You may notice that the 5 emotions that I gave you, I only used partway through my because papers. Sometimes it works to use those 5 emotions, frustration, anger, disappointment, embarrassment, and sadness, all through the because papers. And sometimes it works to use them to start out with, to get your brain moving. Then you shift into other things. So your titles for the because papers may change from I feel into just something else. For example, my second day of my food issue was I am selfish because. And my third day is I have food issues because. But my first day was I feel angry because. So that kind of helped me get it going. On my second example, the second day was this person hurts people because. And the third day was this person has a hard life because. So you're going to start out always on the first day with an I feel statement. I feel this way because. But your titles for the papers may shift into other things. The I feel the first day gets your brain going, and that's what's needed. And then you can get down to that root of that issue. So the examples that I have given you today are not specifically about people who've left the church. You may have noticed that, but they are about relationships. And everything that we are trying to do here is about relationships. Your relationship with your person or your people who have left their faith may not be where you want it to be. You might want that relationship to be better. You'd like to feel love for them. You'd like to feel that they have love for you. But triggers keep popping up with this person. And they may be driving you batty or hurting your heart or making you angry. And you'd like to feel better. You'd like to feel at peace. You'd like to feel love. This process of because papers and all of the 3 techniques that I'm teaching you, the write and burn, the because papers, and the next one that I'm going to teach you, which will be in 2 weeks, will help you prepare. You cannot change the other person, but you can change you. And changing you brings peace, it brings clarity, it brings comfort. It changes everything. So I invite you to do because papers this week. Pick one thing. It can be anything that's bothering you, something that just keeps popping up. Maybe the first thing that comes to mind when you're thinking about what you would write about. Take that thing. It doesn't have to be about the person that has left their faith. It can be about anything. Work through the process, get to the root, pull it out, see it for what it is, and let it go. This process allows you to get those strong feelings out at the root, which then opens up space for you to have positive feelings, which then allows you to have positive conversations and healing conversations with people in a way that will build the relationship instead of tear it down. If you have questions about this, if you'd like additional support, if you want to make comments, if you want to share your experience with this, get on the private Facebook group, Just Love Them. If you have not joined already, go on and join there. You can share your experience with this process. You can ask questions. You can get further clarification. It's a great place where we can talk. Again, I invite you to share this podcast with anyone that you know who could benefit from these conversations, who wants to be in that place of peace and wants to love their people, but is having those strong emotions. And as always, you are welcome to book a free mini session with me on my website, ShireeBest.com. I'll put that link in the show notes as well as the Facebook link. And I'll even throw in the YouTube link. How about that? Give this process a try. You will be so glad you did. And join me again next time for another episode of Just Love Them.